The sun had barely risen over the small town of Cedar Creek when Ethan Walker unlocked the rusty gate of his auto repair shop. The sign above the garage read, "Walker Auto Repair. Honest work, fair prices." The paint was faded, the building was old, and business was slow. Ethan was 38 years old and had spent nearly half his life repairing cars. He wasn't rich. In fact, he struggled to pay his bills every month. His shop consisted of 2 repair bays, a tiny office, and a waiting room with chairs that had seen better days. Still, Ethan loved his work. He believed every car had a story, and every customer deserved respect. As he switched on the lights inside the garage, he sighed while looking at a stack of unpaid bills sitting on his desk. Rent, electricity, parts, suppliers, insurance. The numbers never seemed to stop growing. "Another tough month," he whispered. Yet he smiled, because no matter how hard life became, he refused to give up. His father had taught him that. Years ago, before he passed away, his father had given him one piece of advice. "Son, always help people when you can. Money comes and goes, but character stays forever." Ethan never forgot those words. Little did he know, those words were about to change his life. Chapter 2. The mysterious car around noon. Business remained quiet. Only one customer had come in all morning. Ethan was cleaning tools when he heard an unusual sound outside. A powerful engine, not the kind of sound heard in Cedar Creek every day. He looked through the garage window. A sleek black luxury car slowly rolled into the parking lot. The vehicle looked expensive. Very expensive. Its polished body reflected sunlight like a mirror. Ethan immediately recognized the brand. A car worth well over $200,000. His eyes widened. What is a car like that doing here? The engine sputtered, then died completely. A few seconds later, the driver's door opened. Out stepped an elderly man dressed in simple clothes. Nothing flashy, no expensive watch, no bodyguards. Just an older gentleman carrying himself with quiet confidence. The man looked around before approaching the garage. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Could you take a look at my car?" Ethan smiled. "Of course, sir." The man nodded. "I've been driving for hours." Suddenly the engine started making strange noises. "No problem," Ethan replied. "Let's see what's going on." As Ethan opened the hood, he immediately noticed several warning signs. A damaged fuel system component, loose connections, an overheating issue. The repair would take hours. The elderly man watched quietly. "Bad news?" he asked. "Not terrible," Ethan said. "But it'll take some work." The man smiled. "Then I'll wait." Something about the stranger seemed unusual. Calm, patient, observant, as if he was studying everything around him. Chapter 3. A difficult decision. Several hours passed. Ethan worked carefully. Every bolt, every wire, every connection. He treated the luxury vehicle exactly the same way he treated an old pickup truck, because to him, honesty mattered more than appearances. By evening, the repair was complete. The engine purred perfectly. Better than before. The elderly man looked impressed. "Excellent work." Ethan smiled. "Glad I could help." The man reached for his wallet. "How much do I owe you?" Ethan hesitated. Normally, he desperately needed the money. Every dollar mattered. But while working on the car, he had learned something. The elderly man had been traveling to visit his daughter, who was recovering from a serious illness. He had spoken warmly about family, about gratitude, about second chances. Something about the conversation touched Ethan. Then he remembered his father's words. "Help people when you can. Money comes and goes. Character stays forever." Ethan closed the repair invoice. Nothing. The man blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The repair is free." The stranger stared at him. "No, son. Your time has value." Ethan smiled. "I know. But sometimes people need kindness more than a bill." The old man remained silent for several seconds, then he slowly nodded. Very few people think that way anymore. Ethan shrugged. It's just the way I was raised. The elderly man extended his hand. Thank you. They shook hands. The stranger climbed back into the car. Before leaving, he rolled down the window. What is your name? Ethan Walker. The man repeated it carefully, as if committing it to memory. Then he drove away. Ethan watched the luxury car disappear down the road. He never expected to see the man again, but he was wrong. Very wrong, because that single act of kindness was about to change everything. Chapter 4. An Unexpected Visitor. 3 days later, Ethan arrived at the shop expecting another ordinary morning. Instead, he found something impossible. Several black SUVs were parked outside. Men in business suits stood nearby. The moment Ethan stepped out of his truck, one of them approached. Mr. Ethan Walker? Ethan looked confused. Yes? Someone would like to meet you. Who? The man smiled. You'll see. Ethan followed them toward a luxury vehicle parked near the road. The rear door opened, and sitting inside was the elderly man, the same man whose car he had repaired for free. But this time, everything looked different. The expensive security team, the luxury convoy, the professional drivers. Ethan realized this was no ordinary traveler, not even close. The elderly man stepped out and smiled. Good morning, Ethan. Sir, the old man chuckled. I believe I owe you an explanation. And what Ethan was about to learn would leave him speechless. Chapter 5. The truth about the Ethan stood frozen beside the black SUV. The elderly man smiled and motioned for him to sit down. Confused but curious, Ethan entered the vehicle. Inside, the seats were made of fine leather, and the cabin was quieter than any car he had ever experienced. The elderly man extended his hand again. My name is Richard Harrison. Ethan shook it politely. The name sounded familiar. Very familiar. Then it hit him. Richard Harrison was one of the wealthiest businessmen in America, the founder of Harrison Global Industries, a company worth billions of dollars. Ethan's eyes widened. You're Richard Harrison? The old man chuckled. Yes. For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. He had seen Harrison on television, in magazines, on business news channels. But he never imagined the billionaire would be sitting outside his tiny repair shop. Richard leaned forward. 3 days ago, you repaired my car. Ethan nodded. And you refused payment. I was only trying to help. Richard smiled. That's exactly why I'm here. Chapter 6. A secret test. Richard looked out the window. For the last 10 years, I've traveled across the country. Ethan listened carefully. I visit small towns, restaurants, repair shops, family businesses. Why? Because I want to understand people. Richard paused. And because money often hides someone's true character. The billionaire explained that he sometimes disguised himself as an ordinary traveler. Many people treated him differently when they thought he was just another customer. Some overcharged him, some ignored him, some lied to him. Very few showed genuine kindness. You are one of the few. Ethan looked uncomfortable. I didn't do anything special. Richard smiled. That's where you're wrong. He reached into a folder and handed Ethan several documents. Ethan opened them. His heart nearly stopped. The papers showed a proposal, a complete renovation of Walker Auto Repair, new equipment, modern diagnostic tools, new lifts, updated offices, training programs, everything. The estimated value exceeded $1 million. Ethan stared at the pages. This can't be real. It is. Why would you do this? Richard answered quietly. Because good people deserve opportunities. Chapter 7. The offer tears began forming in Ethan's eyes. For years he had struggled. For years he had sacrificed everything to keep the business alive. and now this opportunity was sitting right in front of him. But there was one condition. Richard folded his hands. "If I help you, I want you to promise me something." "What?" "Never lose the values that brought me here." Ethan nodded immediately. "I promise." Richard smiled. "Then let's get started." Over the next several weeks, construction crews arrived. The old garage transformed completely. People across Cedar Creek couldn't believe what they were seeing. Brand new tools arrived. State-of-the-art equipment filled the workshop. The tiny waiting room became a comfortable customer lounge. For the first time in years, Ethan felt hope. Real hope. But success would soon bring a challenge he never expected. Chapter 8. Envy Arrives. Not everyone was happy about Ethan's success. Across town, another repair shop owner watched with growing anger. His name was Victor Kane. Victor owned the largest garage in the county. For years, he had dominated the local market. Now customers were flocking to Ethan's newly renovated shop. Victor couldn't stand it. "How did that nobody get all this money?" he asked. His employees shrugged. Nobody knew the full story. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed Ethan won the lottery. Others believed he inherited money. Some even accused him of fraud. Victor decided to find out himself, and what he discovered made him even more furious. Chapter 9. A Dangerous Rumor. One afternoon, Victor secretly met a local reporter. He began spreading false stories, claims that Ethan's business was involved in illegal deals, claims that the Billionaire investment wasn't legitimate. Within days, gossip spread through town. Some customers became nervous, others canceled appointments. Ethan was shocked. He had worked honestly his entire life. Now people were questioning his integrity. For several nights, he barely slept. The stress became overwhelming. Finally, he called Richard Harrison. "I don't know what to do." Richard listened carefully. Then he gave simple advice. "The truth doesn't need defending forever." "What do you mean?" "If your character is real, eventually people will see it." Ethan wasn't sure, but he trusted Richard, so he continued working. Quietly. Honestly, 1C. Chapter 11. That reached America. Months passed. Walker Auto Repair was no longer just a small-town garage. Customers were driving from neighboring cities to have their vehicles serviced by Ethan and his team. But what made people travel wasn't the modern equipment. It wasn't the beautiful building. It wasn't even the affordable prices. It was Ethan's reputation. People trusted him, and in today's world, trust was rare. One evening, while Ethan was finishing paperwork, his receptionist rushed into the office. "Ethan, you need to see this." She handed him her phone. A major national news channel had published an article about him. The headline read, "The mechanic who refused money and changed his life forever." Ethan stared at the screen. Thousands of comments poured in. People across America were sharing the story. Many wrote, "This is the kind of person we need more of. Character still matters. What an inspiring man." Within days, millions of people had seen the story. Interview requests started arriving. Television stations called. Podcasters wanted to talk. Business magazines requested features. For a man who once struggled to pay electricity bills, the attention felt overwhelming. But Ethan stayed grounded. Every morning, he still opened the garage himself. Every customer still received the same respect. And Richard Harrison watched proudly from afar. Chapter 12. Richard's Hidden Pain. One afternoon, Ethan received an unexpected phone call. It was Richard. His voice sounded different, slower, tired. "Ethan, could you visit me?" "Of course." The next morning, Ethan drove to Richard's estate. The property was breathtaking. But when Richard greeted him, something seemed wrong. The billionaire looked older, much older. They sat together on a large porch overlooking a lake. For a while, neither man spoke. Finally, Richard broke the silence. "There is something I've never told you." Ethan listened carefully. Richard stared at the water. 20 years ago, I had a son. Ethan nodded quietly. He was kind, honest, hardworking. A sad smile appeared on Richard's face. He reminded me of you. Ethan noticed tears forming in the old man's eyes. But I lost him. The words hung in the air. Richard explained that his son had died in a tragic accident at a young age. Since then, success had never felt complete. He built companies, made billions, bought everything money could buy, yet none of it filled the emptiness. That's why I started traveling, Richard said. I was searching for something. What? Richard looked directly at Ethan. Good people. For the first time, Ethan understood. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about business. It was about hope. Richard had spent years searching for people who reminded him that kindness still existed, and somehow he had found Ethan. Chapter 13. The biggest opportunity yet. Few weeks later, Richard invited Ethan to New York City. Ethan had never attended a major business conference before. The event attracted some of America's most powerful entrepreneurs. Hundreds of executives filled the ballroom. When Ethan arrived, he felt completely out of place. Expensive suits, luxury watches, private investors, industry leaders. Then Richard stepped onto the stage. The room immediately fell silent. After speaking about leadership and integrity, Richard surprised everyone. He pointed toward Ethan. I want you to meet someone. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the mechanic. Richard continued. This man taught me something priceless. The audience listened carefully. He reminded me that character matters more than wealth. People began applauding. Then Richard announced something nobody expected. His foundation would launch a national program supporting honest small business owners, and Ethan would help lead it. The room erupted into applause. Ethan couldn't believe what he was hearing. A year ago, he was struggling to survive. Now he was standing before some of the most influential people in America. But the biggest challenge was still ahead. Chapter 14. Victor's final move back in Cedar Creek. Victor Kane was furious. Everything he had tried had failed. The rumors, the accusations, the gossip. Nothing worked. In fact, Ethan had become more respected than ever. Victor became desperate, and desperate people often make dangerous choices. One night, he met with a private investigator. His goal was simple: find something, anything, that could destroy Ethan's reputation. Weeks passed. The investigator searched through financial records, tax documents, business permits, and contracts. Eventually, he returned with disappointing news. I found nothing. Victor slammed his fist on the desk. There has to be something. There isn't. The investigator shook his head. He's exactly who people think he is. Victor sat in silence. For the first time, he realized the truth. His biggest competitor wasn't Ethan's money. It wasn't Ethan's equipment. It wasn't Richard Harrison. It was Ethan's integrity, and that was something Victor couldn't buy. Chapter 15. The storm. Late one autumn evening, a violent storm struck Cedar Creek. Heavy rain flooded roads, strong winds damaged buildings. Power lines collapsed throughout the county. As emergency services worked through the night, disaster struck the town's community center. Several vehicles became trapped in rising floodwater. People needed help immediately. Without hesitation, Ethan gathered his employees. They drove into dangerous conditions to assist. Hour after hour, they rescued stranded families. They repaired emergency vehicles. They helped first responders keep equipment running. Nobody asked about payment. Nobody discussed profits. They simply helped. By sunrise, dozens of families had been assisted. News crews captured the effort. The images spread nationwide. Americans watched as a mechanic and his small team worked through the night to save strangers. Once again, Ethan became a symbol of something rare, selflessness, and Richard Harrison couldn't have been prouder. Chapter 16. A letter that changed everything. A few days later, Ethan received a handwritten letter from Richard. Inside was a short message. Success is not measured by what you own. It is measured by the lives you improve. Thank you for reminding me of that. Richard. Ethan folded the letter carefully. He had no idea that an even bigger surprise was coming, because Richard Harrison had been planning something for months. Something that would change Ethan's future forever. And when the announcement finally came, the entire country would be talking about it. Winter arrived in Cedar Creek. Snow covered rooftops. The streets were quiet. Life seemed peaceful. One morning, Ethan received an invitation from Richard Harrison. The message was simple. Please join me in Chicago on Saturday. There is something important I need to share. Ethan had no idea what to expect. When Saturday arrived, he boarded a plane and traveled to Chicago. The event was being held in one of the largest convention centers in the city. Thousands of people filled the building. Business leaders, journalists, community leaders, students, entrepreneurs. Everyone was waiting for Richard Harrison. As the lights dimmed, Richard walked onto the stage. The audience erupted into applause. Then the billionaire raised his hand. The room became silent. I've spent most of my life building companies, Richard began. I've earned more money than I could ever spend. The crowd listened carefully. But recently, I learned something important. A large screen behind him displayed a photograph. It was Ethan standing in front of his small repair shop before the renovation. Richard smiled. This man reminded me what success truly means. The audience immediately began applauding. Ethan sat quietly, completely surprised. Then Richard continued. Tonight, I am announcing the Harrison Community Legacy Foundation. A new logo appeared on the giant screen. The audience watched closely. This foundation will invest $100 million into honest small businesses across America. Gasps filled the room. $100 million. The amount was almost unbelievable, but Richard wasn't finished. And the first chairman of this foundation will be Ethan Walker. For several seconds, Ethan couldn't move. He simply stared at the stage. The crowd rose to its feet. A standing ovation. Thousands of people applauding, many wiping away tears. A poor mechanic from a small town had just been placed in charge of helping thousands of struggling business owners. Chapter 18. The Final Conversation. After the event, Ethan and Richard sat together in a quiet hotel lounge. For a long time, neither man spoke. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. Why me? Richard smiled softly. Because leadership isn't about power. It's about service. He looked directly into Ethan's eyes. When you fixed my car, you had no idea who I was. Ethan nodded. You didn't help a billionaire. You helped a stranger. Richard continued. That is exactly the kind of person this world needs. Ethan felt emotional. For years, he had worried about bills, about survival, about keeping his shop open. Now he understood something larger. Every small act of kindness matters, even when nobody is watching, especially when nobody is watching. Chapter 19. Victor's Last Lesson. Meanwhile, Victor Kane's business continued struggling. Customers left. Employees resigned. His reputation had been damaged by his own actions. One afternoon, Victor walked into Walker Auto Repair. The employees became silent. Nobody knew why he was there. Victor slowly approached Ethan. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Victor surprised everyone. I'm sorry. The garage fell silent. Victor lowered his head. I spent years trying to destroy you. Ethan listened quietly. I was jealous. Victor's voice cracked. You earned people's respect, and I couldn't understand why. Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. People make mistakes. Victor looked up. You forgive me? Ethan smiled. Forgiveness costs nothing. Tears filled Victor's eyes. At that moment, he learned something money had never taught him. Humility. The two men shook hands, and years of bitterness finally ended. Chap.